Which one go in first? This groove here locates in the selector forks. It doesn't matter where it is in relationship to all the rest of them. All you have to do is place it in those forks. That's the first lay shaft. There they go, they move about. Doesn't matter, again, way around. Selector forks roughly positioned and drop them in. That's in neutral. Kickstart shaft is one I quite frequently have problems with from other people's rebuilds. This particular hole locates on a peg. People don't locate it quite correctly and it jams, rendering that piece totally useless. The first they know about it is when they've got the crankcase bolted up and the kickstart won't return on its own. If you kickstart assembly falls to pieces, people don't realise that there is a correct procedure for putting it back together. There's two little tiny points. There's one just here and there's one just here. These 2 points, sometimes it can be a circle on both, must interline. So now we've got our 2 points located together, down he goes. That's the correct position then, because when it's sitting in the box, that's an oil reservoir hole, and that must be always sitting upwards, as you'll see in a second. Locating on the 2 pins, the 2 holes. This is the oil pump drive shaft. There is a washer on it. The washer goes on the top, not on the bottom. It just sits in there like that. Water pump drive just slots in. And this is how it should look if it's all in correctly. On the later models, this O-ring is very important. From approximately, because there's no actual designation of when they started putting the O-rings in, so from approximately the M model onwards have the O-ring. The J and the K definitely didn't. Some of the L's did, some didn't. And that seals the water bypass of the crankcases. Not to forget, our C-ring goes in the biggest groove of the lot. Check that all our pins are in. These locate the crankshaft bearings. Drop it roughly in place. Locate the seals, the 2 outer ones, in the seal guides. As we can see, the seal guide is just a little bit proud of the seal. That must go into its own little place, and there's only one way to get that in. Just gently lever it across, as we heard it drop. There, and then I've got to get there to push it back in, and push it all the way round and in. That went easy. You'll notice, tops of the bearings have a little dink. If you have that facing you dead upright, that will tell you that the bearing, the recess, is now sitting on the pin in the crankcase. Sit up. That is now seated. These 2 seals, this one and this one over the other side, they must not be sitting, as this one is, against the flywheels. So it's just a gentle little leverage with a screwdriver against to the bearing, and that's ready. This is my preferred oil for the Suzuki 2-stroke engine. I tend to use a dedicated oil applicator, and oil in a little cup. Little things, anything, food cups, whatever you like. Well, that makes a lovely noise. And just draw a little drop of oil out down the side of the bearings, the oil throw plates, crankshaft, big ends. Doesn't need a great deal at this stage, just enough so that the engine's not going to be running dry when we first start it up. Brand new box of 3-bond, the Crankcase sealant for Suzuki GT750 engines. Now with the gasket compound, we only put it on the top crankcase surface, on its mating points. We don't put it on the bottom. So we start off. Unfortunately, you've got to use your finger, but then that's what fingers are for. Right, I prefer to put it on by holding the studs rather than holding the crankcase sides. Makes it a lot easier. You've got your crankshaft con rods sticking out the front, down the bottom, hooking over it, and down she goes. Top crankcase bolts in roughly, first of all, just pinch them down. And then you can check your kickstart returns smoothly as we go back to those 2 bearings that I was talking about right at the beginning. Rev counter drive goes into there. As you'll notice, it's got a bolt sticking out of it. That bolt came out of here. It's the number 21. I use it to extract it because there's a little thread in there. So that makes life a lot easier. So once you've located him, you can remove your bolt, put him in there, number 24. Let's say 21, I think I did. And that's that bit. Right, now I'm going to locate the rev counter drive. The hole, are you on that? That one? Roughly in that position. Press him in. And you need to get down below it to see that hole and gently just tap him home. 2 holes in the lining are located. By the locking bolt. Right, as we put our main crankcase bolts in, we're just going to put a little bit of copper grease on the ends of them just to make them easier and to stop them from sticking together. The longest one always goes in that hole there. That's a good starting point. You then get one with a cable guide. That one goes in this one here, the number 8 hole. Faces out like so. At this stage in the assembly, all bolts just go in and it just pinched up. Doesn't matter what sequence you put them in, but at the end, when all the bolts are in, we will then turn around and torque them home in their sequences. This is the infamous number 13 bolt. Should have an aluminium washer, but if you are unable to get your hands on an aluminium, the copper one is perfectly acceptable. But in all cases, the washer and bolt should be sealed. Two cable guides. Number 14 bolt and number 10 bolt. That's where they go. Not anywhere else. Suzuki injection recycling system pipe guide. Always goes over top of this little cutaway on those 2 bolts. Always. I tend to set them at about 26.5, 27. That gives you room to manoeuvre later on if needs be. Number 1 and number 2. Number 3, they are numbered, but they're a job to see. On some engines you might not be able to see them. Number 4, number 5, number 6, number 7, finally number 8. Then back it back down now to do the 12mm bolts at approximately 15 foot-pounds. Number 11, number 12, infamous 13, 14, 15, 16 is at the back, 17, 18, and they're 6 to 7 pounds, which is virtually nothing. Finger tight would be quite acceptable. Because of the low torque, it doesn't really matter which way you put those ones in. So they're not really doing a lot. Right. We've got the 10mm on, we'll do the front ones. Right. This bolt should have an earth strip on it to the frame. The owner hasn't supplied the earth strip, so we will torque it down, then he'll have to do it. We need to put the O-ring into the O-ring groove. This can be quite a game. Sometimes it'll stay there, and another time it will pop out, as it keeps doing. Yeah, got it. 4 screws. Now we're going to fit the oil guide plate. This is the awkward one getting in here. Insert the middle screw first. It's always easier than having the other 2 bouncing about. We don't lock tight them for the simple reason that if it ever needs to come to pieces, it won't with Loctite on these screws. Just driven home nice and tight. From the thrust washer to this thrust washer. Chamfered side goes against the back. Then the clutch bearing. This one, the chamfer towards you. The centre locates. New locking washer every time. Centre nut. And the centre nut is torqued up to 35 to 39 foot-pounds. Now to lock the centre, just find any gear. Come on. Torqued up and down. And back into neutral. Bend our tab washer. You only need to do it once. 8 cork plates, 7 steel plates. Corks go in first, then the steel. There's a sight radius on the plates and a definite cut-off flat on the back. I always put them in so the radius is towards me. And finishing with the cork plate. Okay. The clutch bolts and springs have already been checked. And we start off by doing bolt, a spring and a spacer every other one. Now take them down roughly halfway every other one. The reason it's done in this sort of pattern is so we don't distort our clutch plates with the pressure. Once we've got them seated, there's no torque on these screws. All I prefer to do is tap. Six taps, and that's the clutch assembled. Clutch spring seat, clutch spring locates over there. Bring him round. Sometimes they're quite a fight. On, boss, in the middle, on. There's only one way to get the dowels in. Gasket. Frequently they'll just need a little gentle persuasion. Okay. Clutch activating arm on washer, big nut. Just butt him up gently. Smaller nut goes on the top. Spring. Right, okay, come. The nut, back one, wants to be free. There is a small amount mentioned about how tight the nut should go to the washer, but you're not going to be able to find that. So the best thing is to get him up almost tight, back him back a quarter of a turn, hold in the other one and lock them. And that's that done. Locking off the crank to put the alternator rotor back on. Just use a socket that's fairly close to it so it spreads the load. A couple of blocks of wood underneath, holds it tight. It's a conical shaft, so the stator goes on, and torque on the nut holds it in place. Now I torque these up to around about 15-16 foot-pounds. There's nothing sort of set down. Starter clutch. Woodruff key already located. This one hasn't come out, it's in there solidly. If they're very loose, then get rid of it and replace it because they will shear. Sprag the crank again, using anything you like, and locate the groove on. You'll feel him go on, and as it goes on, it goes tight. Suzuki don't use Loctite, they use a little bit of paint on that thread. Simple as that. That ensures it doesn't come off too easy. £36 per foot is the torque. Starter motor, starter clutch, idler gear, thrust washers, one on the back, one on the front. The bigger wheel goes to the back. Eventually. And in. Starter motor. Hold the idler gear, otherwise you'll push the whole thing out. Starter motor in. Pin. Water pump idler gear. Guide him on, home he goes. Flat washer. E-clip. Pinion one. Water bypass union. Just a little bit of the old Suzuki compound. There's no need to spread it because it will take itself in as it goes round. Assembling a brand new piston. Trick: putting the circlips in first on the one side, insert the piston pin into the piston, which acts as a backstop for the circlip so you don't push it out. Insert little tiny screwdriver, thumb over circlip, gently ease him in. There he goes. Take a piston pin out, we've got a circlip in. It does need pulling round so that that point sits in the groove. Piston rings. People are usually too gentle with them, don't they? Just go straight over the top one. Obviously you're going to be watching for the little step in, so they go on the pegs and they part over and on. It's as simple as that. O-rings brand new. 1, 2, 3. That, on some engines, goes straight through to the crankcase of the water. If yours is blocked off, there's no need to worry about putting an O-ring in there, unless you've got a problem there where somebody's been trying to get the barrels off and it leaks. Base gasket. On first. Small end bearing, little drop of 2-stroke oil, roll it around, shake off the excess into the small end die. Your 2 thrust washers, noting you've got recesses in both of them. The recesses go over the sides of the small end bearings and sit there. Piston pin, partly insert it, noting of course the direction, the arrow. In and through, piston on. Circlip as before. Minimum pressure is only needed. If you bend a circlip, replace it with a brand new one. And then you can bring him round. I'm right-handed, so I start from the left-hand side, which is the number 1 piston. I have it slightly proud of the studs. And we check that all our piston ring gaps are around the peg areas. Gotcha. This stud goes in this hole here. This is to help you locate the gasket. one flat washer, spring washer, over nut, that's your brand head gasket, head. Sleeve nuts, 11 of, to 29 foot-pounds. The 8mm bolts, torque down, 14 foot-pounds. Rear bypass hose. Truss hose. On the later models, on the earlier models, it doesn't come through the back, it all goes up the front. On the J model, priming the oil lines, just a little drop, leave the O-rings in, they act as a deterrent to oil coming out, and you can see it going down the lines. Any small bubbles in the oil lines, after we prime them, doesn't matter, they will come out when you start the engine up by holding the oil pump fully open. Locating pin into the oil drive. Gently round that position. 3 screws, there secures it. So make sure your dowels are there, one there, one there. Gasket, brand new Suzuki genuine, on. Casing, pin, the location hole for the ignition timing, just there. Twiddle him about and on he goes. Don't over tighten these screws, they don't need a great deal of tension, they just need pinching up. Don't forget the O-ring, digital gear indicator. Just push the brushes in. Grommet, locate in the cutaway underneath there, and we can feed our wires underneath. Bind them round.